Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everyone in today's class for the third intermediate grade. Our textbook is Super Goal 6 and today we have enrichment number 4. It will be presented by me, teacher Mazen Harbi, and the sign language by Mr. Fawaz Al-Agil. So let's begin. What we are going to review today, we're going to review Unit 6 that is called Culture Shock, which you can find it from pages 58 until 67. So if you remember, the first part or the first thing that we have learned in this unit was this phrase or this proverb, which is when in Rome, do as the Romans do. And what do you mean by this? It means that when you visiting a new place, when you're visiting a new country, you should try to act as the local people do. And also we have read a couple of examples based on this phrase. For example, in England, saying please and thank you and excuse me shows that you're imitating exactly what the local people do. And also, if you run accidentally to someone, it's better to say sorry. And also, when you stand in line, you have the phrase like queue up. So in each of these different traditions and different customs of each country, we also made a couple of questions like this. What do people in England usually do when they wait at a bus stop? So when they wait at the bus stop, they stand in line or they queue up. Also, one of the other country that we have read about, a group of countries actually, which is the Mediterranean countries, that we usually such as Italy, Greece, and Spain, that they don't go for a meal before 9 p.m. And restaurants mostly are open past midnight. And also it's coming in these countries that they have an afternoon break. So what are some of the Mediterranean countries? As we said, Italy, Greece, and Spain. And what do people usually do there in the afternoon? They usually take a break. Also, in the quick check question, we did answer a couple of questions about the first page, and we said that let's write down 4 sentences in the article that uses expressions of advice and recommendations. And we should start these recommendations in this phrase. It is good idea to. For example, it is good idea to say sorry when you bump into someone in England. And it's good idea to take a break when you are in the Mediterranean countries, and so on. So this is how can you present and how can you introduce a recommendation or an advice to someone. To use this phrase, it is good idea too. After this, we answer a true-false questions about the statements or the sentences that we have read about the places before. After this, with the pair work, we ask you to ask and answer about customs in different countries using the information that we found on the same page. And not only this, but also trying to give advice to travelers to different countries and giving advice by using the phrase that we have learned, which is, it is good idea too. So, after this, we went to the grammar rule where we talked about the verb plus infinitive. And we said that the infinitive form can follow certain verbs, including what we can see here, which is afford, manage, offer, choose, decide, promise, refuse, expect, and forget, remember, try, hope, and learn. And for example, when we say we didn't expect to arrive, and we said that this is the infinitive, to plus a verb, to arrive. And the other sentence, they managed to get an earlier flight. And the airline refused to pay for our hotel. I didn't remember to bring my toothbrush. So this is, these are some of the verbs that after this verb we can use the infinitive, as we can see here in red. And also some of them, yes, can be followed by gerunds, as we can see on Unit 4. So also we learn some of the expressions of advice with infinitives, like for example, try to be on time, Remember to bring your notebook. Make sure to do your homework. So these are expressions entailing advice, and we use in these expressions the infinitive to plus a verb, as we can see here. And about gerund, we said that we form gerund by adding an ing to a verb. By adding an ing to a verb. And as you can see here, learning is fun. So gerund, as we learned, that sometimes work as subjects in sentences, as we can see here. After this, we did have an exercise about making sentences, and we use the infinitive. So as you can see, we did have two parts, and we need to join this part by making sentences and making sure to use the infinitive, as we can see here. So this phrase, good idea, the verb follow, and local custom. So we said that it is good idea to follow local customs, and the same goes like this. We number two, for example, we managed to get seats on the crowded bus. So it will be like this: we managed to get seats on the crowded bus. So these were the answers of the first exercise on that grammar rule. After this, we had another exercise to complete the following sentences with infinitive using the information in the articles that we can find on page 58 and 59. So as you can see here, these are the sentences completed to make an advice. After this, to look at the photos, we had another exercise where you look at the photos and tell your opinion about what do you think that is polite or not polite, and what is the right or wrong thing to do in the other country. And if you want to present this, if you want to express this, you can start by saying it is polite for businessmen to shake hands, or shaking hands is polite in my country. So this is how can you introduce for new travelers maybe about what is allowed or what is right or wrong in your own country. So here also the other examples that we have did or we have practiced in the last time. And also with D, we completed the sentences with the correct form of the infinitive or gerund. And we did, and we stressed the importance of reviewing the list of the verbs that can be followed by gerunds in Unit 4. So these were the answers of exercise D. After this, we went to language in context, where we discussed with partner how people handling the following situation in your country. And we have expressed the sentences like this: standing in line to catch a bus is common. So we have talked about this, about different scenarios and how can we express them here in our own country. So we can say it is common to stand in line, or it is common standing in line to catch a bus, or it isn't common for people to stand in line to catch a bus. So as you can see here, for the first one we use gerund, and for the second one we use the infinitive. So you have you can use both of them as well. Also, we continue this by doing the following exercises. After this, we went to a listening exercise where I ask you to listen to advise about traveling to the United States, and then after you listen, then you have to write either true or false statements about the statements that appear. And these were the answers of this listening exercise, as we have learned from the last time. After this, we went straight to the pronunciation, where I ask you to listen how to is reduced and pronounced quickly, then practice. You see that sometimes when I pronounce the infinitive verb, sometimes I stress to, not because this is how we pronounce it, but just to stress its importance. But for real life, in everyday in daily speech, when we speak English, usually people won't notice that the verb to. For example, it is polite to shake hands. It is impolite to stare at someone. It is advisable to study the customs, and it is common to exchange business cards. So After this, we went to the conversation. And the first thing, or before we went to the conversation, we had a couple of questions about you questions. For example, what are the do's and don'ts, and do you know about for different countries? And what are some of the cultural differences that you know about? So here we talked about some of the cultural differences and what is allowed or not allowed in these countries. And also, are there any different customs in different parts of your countries? And we have learned that usually one country has their own customs and traditions, but maybe for even larger countries, they have more than one customs and more than a tradition based on the region. And number three, I ask you if you ever lived or traveled abroad, and if you did have any difficulty in adjusting, in adapting to that new country or new life. And number four, have you ever had a problem because of cultural differences? And if it's your own experience or the experience of someone you know, when he went to a different place or different country and he faces some cultural differences, then you can express it, you can explain it. And after this, what are the common gestures in your culture and what do they mean? The gestures, the moves, the symbols that you have in your own culture and what each one of them means. So here these were a couple of questions that we discussed just to emphasize the importance of the cultural differences that we can see among countries. After this, we listened to a conversation between Will and Edgar, and it was a conversation about Edgar who went to China, and Will is asking him to know more about China and know more about Edgar and how did he adjust to life in there. So we have read many cultural differences in terms of food, and in terms of transportation, language, and also not only this, but also we have read a couple of expressions like to be honest, and we said that to be honest usually when you want to introduce something, and also I got the hang of it, it means that I understand it. And also, no kidding, it means that when you are surprised of hearing something and you are in shock, then we use this expression, no kidding. So these were some of the expressions that we have read. And also, to make it more interesting, we ask you to role play the conversation like the one above, but using different countries, and you can express surprise at some of the things mentioned. So we said that you can choose a friend of yours and make him choose a country and read about it. So just to make a similar conversation to the one we have read between Will and Edgar. After this, we went to the reading lesson, and in this reading lesson, we did read about what kind of problems that people usually have adapting to a different culture, and we have discussed some of the problems, some of the issues that usually people may face when they travel to a different country. And after this, inside the reading text, we have learned some new phases of adapting. For example, we have learned about the adjustment phase and the emptiness or rejection phase and the conformist phase and the assimilation phase or complete adjustment and the reverse cultural shock. So we have discussed all of these types of adapting or adapting to when you travel to a new country, and we have explained them, and even we have mentioned some of the examples about each one of these phases. So after this, we did answer a couple of questions and after reading, and then we went straight to the discussion questions where I ask you, or we discussed together, to think of, I ask you to think of this question, which is, have you ever lived for a period of time in another country? And if you do, what was your experience like? And if you did get any culture shock or reverse culture shock. And we said that sometimes this term could be tricky. Culture shock when you visit a new country, and reverse culture shock when you go back to your own country, but you you need more time to adapt to your own country because of the long time you stayed at different countries. And also, we talked about what kind of experiences culture shock people usually have when they visit another country. And also, as a project, I ask you to think of an advice to give to travelers who wants to come to your country. Just make a list. What are the things that are allowed and not allowed when they want to come to your country? After this, we went to the writing exercise where we read, or writing lesson, where we read different quotes about culture and travel in general, and we discuss each one of them and what does each one of them mean. After this, in the writing corner, we learned that we use the verb to be, used to, plus gerund or noun. It means that, which means that this is something to be familiar with. Like, for example, when we said, I am not used to eating with chopsticks. So here, just to express that I am not familiar with eating with chopsticks. And also another example, I am used to getting up early. So here we use used to plus gerund, and this is just to express that I am familiar, I am already doing these things, but we use it in the form of used to plus gerund. The second part we have learned, which is when we use used to plus gerund, but for another thing, which is to become familiar with something. For example, when you travel to different countries and you stayed there for long, and now you're getting used to the customs or the local customs, the local culture of that place. So this is the second or the other function for used to plus gerund. And also the third one, when you use used to plus infinitive, just for an action to refer to an action that's happened in the past but doesn't happen now. For example, we used to walk to school. We didn't use to take the bus. So here, this is when we use used to plus infinitive, just to indicate that this action happening has happened a lot of times in the past, but now it didn't. So, and here other example, I used to go to bed late, but now I go to bed early. And after this, in exercise C, I ask you to imagine that you are staying in a foreign country, and so write an email to a friend about the cultural differences you have experienced. And before you write, you may want to research the local habits, the customs, the gestures, and the cuisine, weather, etc. So I ask you to imagine yourself, you're going to a different country. Just write the things that you can find different than your own country. So make sure you start we said that make sure you start your email or with your writing by greeting, and then you introduce the main ideas and also the closing words like see you soon, write back to me, and then sign it by your name. So after this, we went to the last part or the last lesson of this unit, which is form, meaning, and function, where we use past perfect. We said that we use the past perfect tense, which is had plus past participle, just to indicate that an action has happened before another action happened in the past. And just to do this, we had some expressions that help us in such sentences. Expressions like after, already, before, by the time. So for example, by the time we got to the airport, our flight had already left. So the first action has happened here is this one, that our flight had already left. And since this is the first action, in this case, we use the past perfect, as you can see, which is had plus the past participle. And with the other part of the sentence, we use only simple past. And also we have showed a lot of examples similar to this. And here as well a similar example. And just to remind you that, of course, the contraction that we can see here in had, we can see it or we can use it in all of the subject pronouns, as you can see in this little box. And after this, we did answer a couple of questions about the past perfect, as you can see. And we said that what is important that you know what is the first action that has happened. And when you know that this is the first action, then in this case, you use the past participle, which is had plus the past participle. So these are also other examples of the same exercise, exercise A. Also, another exercise where I ask you to complete the text with the correct past tense of these verbs. So, for example, had always wanted to visit China. So here are the answers of this exercise. So we complete this exercise, we learn the differences between the past tense and also the past perfect. So now we have reached the end of our lesson. Thank you very much for watching.